on to New York, and we are going to do another update on the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. It continues. For the last week and a half, we had the four girls that testified. Last week we ended with the pilot that he was on the stands. He was testifying. So this week we'll continue with the pilot. And then there's a couple other people that are things. So I'm going to start with the pilot and what he's testified and then move on from there. So Jeffrey Epstein's former pilot testified that a who's who of powerful men, including former presidents Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, flew aboard Epstein's private plane. The pilot, Larry Vysotsky, said he would typically be given notice if Clinton or high-profile passengers like him would be flying. He recalled renowned violinist Itzhak Perlman flew to Michigan with Epstein for the Interlochen Center for the Arts summer camp. He said he remembered Prince Andrew, Maine Senator George Mitchell, Ohio Senator John Glenn, and actor Kevin Spacey on flights. He also said he'd fly Epstein to Columbus, Ohio, where Epstein also had property, to see billionaire businessman Les Wexner. There's always been some intriguing speculation about Jeffrey Epstein's relationship to Les Wexner. Epstein referred to Wexner as his client, but Vysotsky said he believed them to be friends as well. None of the high-profile passengers mentioned in Vysotsky's testimony Tuesday are alleged to have committed any wrongdoing in relation to the ongoing trial. Vysotsky's testimony came on the second day of Maxwell's federal trial on charges of conspiracy and sex trafficking. He testified Maxwell frequently traveled on Epstein's private jet between 1994 and 2004 and would often facilitate travel plans with Vysotsky for Epstein. Maxwell was Epstein's number two and was his go-to person to handle everything else that was not business related, the pilot testified. He described his memory of the pair's relationship as more personal than businesslike, but more couplish than actually romantic. He didn't remember seeing them kiss or hold hands, he said. Logging the names of all passengers on Epstein's private flight was not a priority, but they tried their best to be accurate. For international flights, he said he had to report an accurate passenger log. If he didn't know a passenger's name, he'd notate the passenger by their gender. So the pilot has finished his testimony. The prosecution tried and was successful in getting more than a dozen photographs being displayed as part of their exhibit of Jesus. What's the word I'm looking for? Exhibitions. So what the photographs were to show was to show that they wanted to show that Maxwell and Epstein had more than just a business relationship. Okay, so they wanted to show the carefree surface of a relationship that, according to witness testimony, masked darker depths. They were introduced by the government over defense objections as prosecutors sought to document through the images Miss Maxwell's long-standing relationship with Mr. Epstein. Miss Maxwell's lawyers have not said publicly who they will call to testify, but said they will put on a case that is expected to last no more than 4 days. They suggested that they want to present at least one expert witness to counter testimony from an expert called by the government who described a process known as grooming. Grooming is a process that is used by sexual predators to target victims and acclimate them to abuse. But the timeline that the abuses occurred with the girls, they also implicate Miss Maxwell. But the timeline implies that Miss Maxwell herself is unlikely to testify, and jurors will not hear firsthand about her relationship with Mr. Epstein, which in many ways is at the center of the case. The government has contended that Miss Maxwell was Mr. Epstein's best friend and right hand, even after a personal, intimate relationship ended. She was described during an opening statement as his willing accomplice. Miss Maxwell, a prosecutor, said, walked the girls into a room where she knew that men would molest them. The photographs that the prosecutors were successful in getting shown as exhibits are part of a trove found in 2019 when FBI agents searched Mr. Epstein's townhouse on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where some of those abuse was said to have taken place. Prosecutors said at the time that the authorities had seized hundreds of pictures of nude or partially nude young girls and young women and girls, some of which had been stored in a safe. Defense lawyers objected to the photographs of Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell being shown in court, saying that there was no testimony that the images were unaltered and suggesting that it was not necessary for the government to enter multiple pictures into evidence. But prosecutor Alison Moe told the judge that overseeing the case that the relationship between Ms. Maxwell and Mr. Epstein is central to the case because the defense has repeatedly tried to distance Ms. Maxwell from Mr. Epstein and his affairs and argued that things were compartmentalized. She said a large number of photos were needed to show that Ms. Maxwell had been more than a functionary in Mr. Epstein's world. Prosecutors are saying that these photographs showed how close the relationship were throughout time, and given the change in hairstyles, the people in the photographs are clearly aging. The judge agreed, and the next day the pictures were being flashed onto a screen in the court, visible to jurors and the public, and offering a glimpse into part of Ms. Maxwell and Mr. Epstein's private life together. Just as the photos provide little insight into the inner lives of Ms. Maxwell and Mr. Epstein, their potential impact on the jurors is difficult to assess. One photograph that was shown to the jury was entered into evidence under seal, meaning members of the public may not see it. Ms. Meader offered no details of what it depicted, but a pretrial motion filed by prosecutors identified that image as a photograph of Mr. Epstein and Ms. Maxwell swimming together while nude. They're stating that the photographs are relevant to the relationship, as it established that there's a personal relationship and an intimate relationship between the two. So to the extent the defense at trial argues that the defendant was merely an employee, the photograph is evidence to the contrary. And on Thursday, which was today, Ghislaine Maxwell's former executive assistant testified at the sex abuse trial that she never saw Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein engage in inappropriate conduct with underage girls. Kimberly Espinosa, age 55, was the first witness called by Maxwell defense team following 2 weeks of testimony from 4 women who said Maxwell groomed them between 1994 and 2004 by abuse by the late financier Jeffrey Epstein. According to Espinosa, she says, I highly respected Ghislaine, added that she and Maxwell were together just about every day between 1996 and 2002, when Espinosa worked for the daughter of the late British Baron. I look up to her very much, Espinosa said. Espinosa also said Jane appeared to be 18 years old when she visited Epstein's office with her mother and brother. She testified that she was aware of the crimes Maxwell had been accused of. When asked by Everdell whether she ever saw Maxwell or Epstein engage in inappropriate conduct with underage girls, Espinosa replied, never. Under cross-examination, Espinosa acknowledged that she never traveled to Epstein's Palm Beach, Florida estate, where Jane said most of her abuse took place. Undermining the credibility of Jane and the other accusers is a key part of Maxwell's defense. Now, if Espinosa has been with Ghislaine every day between 1996 and 2002, how is it that Espinosa has never been to Palm Beach? Espinosa needs to be charged with perjury. Her lawyers have argued that the woman's memories have faded over the years and that the women have a financial incentive to implicate Maxwell since they received awards from a compensation fund set up for Epstein's victims. Espinosa needs to be charged with perjury because she lied. She lie. Anyways, that's the wrap up for the update on that particular murder trial. It continues. I will keep giving you guys updates as, time goes on.